So I'm going to show you how to text wrap or place text on an object in InDesign. So to start off with, we're going to just place text on an object by using the text tool. And we're just going to click on the actual object, and I'm going to go ahead and fill with placeholder text. And you can see that now there's text on this object. This isn't actually text wrap though, so we can't adjust the margins as we like. But what you can do is go into the paragraph tool and increase the left and right ones. There's no tool to increase the top and bottom ones, sadly. What you can do is just press enter and you'll have this nice little line up here that brings the text away from the edges of the top, and you can just delete the last line of your text on the bottom, and you can adjust that. You can press enter again and you can play around with the actual type tools, see what works for you. Now, this one, we're actually going to do a text wrap, but we're going to invert it so that the text is on the circle. So let's say you don't have the text wrap tool open. So I'm going to show you how to find that. Go to Window, and it's just right here, or at least on a Windows computer, the shortcut is Control Alt W. So we're just going to go ahead and open up that tool. And what's nice about InDesign is you don't need to select both the text box and the object. You just need to select the object to text wrap. And we want the text to actually be on the circle, so we're going to select the invert. Now I'm going to place the text box over the circle, and I'm going to go ahead and fill with placeholder text. And as you can see, the bounding box for the text is too big, and that's why we have that overhang. So we're just going to shrink the bounding box to the edges of the circle so the text is actually inside the circle and only inside the circle. So now that the text is only inside the circle, we're going to select the circle itself because right now we have the text selected, and we can tell that we have the circle selected now because the text wrap option appeared, and we're going to increase the inner margin so that the text isn't touching the edges of the circle, that nice margin that we were talking about earlier. And now that we increase the margin size, the text box is too big again, so we're going to shrink that to the inner margins of the circle so that there's no overhang. And I recommend using a bigger shape. As you can see, there's not much text in this actual circle, so maybe use a bigger shape, but I'm not going to stop you. Do what you want. But those are two different ways to have the text on top of an object. Now I'm going to show you how to text wrap with this image that I brought in, and this is a transparent image, but InDesign doesn't really like transparents. So as you can see, this image is transparent, but when you go to text wrap, the default is to wrap around the bounding box, and we don't want that. So I'm going to place a text box on top of both of these images, and I'm going to fill with placeholder text. And you can see it's around the bounding box. And like I said, we don't want that. Maybe you do, but I do not. So I'm going to select the image again. And instead of bounding box, we're going to detect edges. And now it's going around the cat because it's finally recognized that this is a transparent. And we can increase the margins for the actual cat itself. So that blue line is where the text ends. So text will not go past that blue line with this. Then another option is alpha channel. So detect edges can be kind of iffy, especially if you haven't fully erased some pixels on the edges. It will detect jagged edges, and it gets iffy. So I prefer alpha channel personally, but I would play around with the options, see what works best for you. And now I'm going to show you a newish feature on InDesign called Select Subject with this one. And what Select Subject actually does, it will auto detect what the subject is. And you can see it's not that good because it, for some reason, it didn't capture all of the subject. But the good thing about this is you can actually manually adjust these anchor points and the lines. So if you want a little bit more on the side, you can just increase them. One thing to note is you can't increase the margins from the actual panel with this, so you have to actually manually move that once you do a user modified path. And then you can also invert, but I don't recommend doing that on top of such a busy object because it gets hard to read the text, but you do you. I'm not going to control you. So the other options, wrap around bounding box, which again creates that square, jump object, and I'm actually just going to shrink the object so we can fully see the effect because right now the object is taking up quite a bit of the actual page. So now when I move around the object, you can see that the text jumps around the actual box. And then this next option, you won't really see the full effects because I don't have any columns in this document. But what it does is it forces the text to go to the next column so that there will be no text underneath your image. And that's how you text wrap in InDesign. I hope this helped, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.